Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
Welcome to Becoming Bridge Builders, the podcast where we explore stories of leaders who bring hope, healing, and connection into our world. Today, we're honored to have Edith Yoder, Chief Executive Officer of Bridge of Hope National. With more than 30 years of dedicated service, Edith has led Bridge of Hope transformation from a small Pennsylvania ministry into a national movement, working to end family homelessness. With a master's degree in adult and organizational development from Temple University and a bachelor's in accounting from Eastern Mennonite University, she brings both heart and strategic vision to this work. Her leadership has expanded support for countless single mothers and children, building neighborhoods of support across the United States. Edith, welcome to the podcast.
It is so good to be here and talking with you.
So good to have you, and I'm looking forward. This is a great conversation. So I'm going to ask you my favorite question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
All right. Well, I'm going to say it has to be from my grandma.
Okay.
She always said to us, I can actually hear her voice in my head, be kind and fair. And I feel like that has been important words in my life. She was a very important person in my life in my early years. And her sense of equity and fairness lives with me, and kindness. She was the first person, okay, maybe this is saying more than your question once.
No, this is good.
She was the first person I saw interacting with someone who was homeless.
Oh, okay.
She lived along a busy road, and often what we called hobos back in the 70s were men who were facing homelessness and walking the streets, and they would knock at her door, and she would have brown bag lunches that she would give to them when they would knock at her door. And just like she modeled that kindness and fairness. So anyway.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I always love the backstory. Sometimes those are things that we don't think about, but they shape our lives so profoundly.
They do. And I want to be that person. I think of for my own grandkids. Like, I want to be that person who lives what they speak.
Yeah, that's powerful. So how is homelessness different for families with children?
Yeah, it is. Like, I don't know what your image when you think of homelessness is, but I think for all of us, like we see out in the public square, mostly adults who are on their own. So men or women, but typically alone. So family homelessness is really hidden. That would be the first thing I would say is just the hidden nature of family homelessness. And yet this past year, family homelessness rose in our country by 39%.
Wow.
So like it's this invisible but really growing percentage of families. Family homelessness typically looks like a mom. The average age of a child is 5 who is homeless. So a mom with 2 kids typically, and at least one of those children is 5 or younger. So Yeah, there's so much data that shows us, family homelessness often includes it is brought about because of family violence. So 90% of women who are moms who are homeless have violence in their family history. Um, yeah, so I think there's lots of different ways. I'll also say that while families are more likely to be sheltered, that means like not on the street, but like living in a temporary shelter. Over 50% of families who are without a place to live are not in shelters. So
Mm,
that just tells us like these numbers are really hard to get to. These are families. We just had a family who she's been living in her car. She said she parks her car at different places every night, but she and her 2-year-old are living in their car. So she's not going to be visible, um, but and she's not going to be counted in any census of homeless families. But there she is. So yeah, family homelessness is complex and looks different than kind of our image of somebody holding a sign when we're driving down some street somewhere.
when I was a pastor in Milwaukee, we had a ministry. I was president of the transitional housing section in Milwaukee, and again, it was kind of the thing of it was families again that were trying to reestablish themselves with a place of residence because I lived in some very cold areas. So for us, homelessness was really serious when I lived in Chicago and Milwaukee because those are just brutal winters.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what unique challenges and vulnerabilities do people face that the public doesn't always recognize when it comes to homelessness?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think especially around family homelessness, it is not recognized that you have to be invisible or you will lose your children to foster care or yeah, to the state. Um, you cannot be living rough. Um, so I think that is one big thing. I think the other big thing is what we know about adverse childhood experiences and trauma, that the more mobility that children experience in their early years, and by mobility, I mean like moving from one location to another, the more of that, the higher their scores of trauma are. And so we're often seeing families who um, a child has been in 7 school districts this past year. And um, that level of just instability is having detrimental impact on children for the long term. And I feel like that is a big piece that is just not spoken about much in terms of family homelessness.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't think about the need to be silent about your situation if you're a parent with kids.
Yeah, and so it's about who do I trust? Do I have, connections? So sometimes it's, I can I can stay with my mom for a couple days, but she lives in a 55 plus community that she's not allowed to have guests and children. So after 3 days, I need to leave, and then I can stay with somebody over here, but they have Section 8, and so if I stay more than 5 days, the landlord will think, I'm a permanent, uh, roommate, and so I can't stay there, and so it does become this, like, I have some social connects that can help me, but I can't stay long or I jeopardize their housing. Um, so,
Wow.
yeah. Lack of connection. So it's certainly one group of people who have connections that they can move to. Kind of couch surfing is the language that is often used. But many of the families that we're seeing don't even have somebody. Th- there are broken bridges, I will say, Um, so family relationships that have been um, destroyed, often because of trauma-related pieces, um, and there's no one to turn to. Um, so I think that's also a piece that's not always visible. I think, you know, oh, if I was homeless as a in my 20s or 30s, I could have gone to my sisters, I could have gone to my parents, to my aunts. But if those relationships are broken already because of past hurt, where do we turn?
I've had several guests on my podcast who are experts in the foster care system,
Mm.
and they talk about the horrors of the foster care system. For a single mom or single dad that's trying to keep their kids out of that system and they're homeless, the challenges become even more great
Yeah.
because once your kid gets in that system, you have to jump through so many hoops to get them back, including having a stable home. So if you're homeless, I can see why you'd be afraid of that becoming known so that your child's on a radar somewhere.
Yes. And to add to that complexity, a growing number, a high percentage of moms who are homeless have been through the foster care system themselves. And so they know the pain, and that is part of their own trauma and their own lack of connection is because they have aged out of the foster care system themselves.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So let's get into your organization because I'm curious to find out the Bridge of Hope. You transformed it from a local ministry to a national movement. What were some of the turning points that helped you make that shift from that local to national
Yeah.
agency?
I would say that the one pivotal moment was, our founding Bridge of Hope is just outside of the Philadelphia area, and, the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a front page article about the very first mom that Bridge of Hope served, and her neighboring volunteers from a local church who we had matched with her to provide friendship and connection and support. And so 2 years after she had been through the program, was on her own, was working, the paper found out about this story and ran an article. And that Philadelphia Inquirer front page story really, um, generated calls for us. A call from New Jersey, a call from Pittsburgh saying, "Hey, we'd love what we read about engaging churches in the solution here to ending homelessness. How can we do what you're doing?" And we were 2 years old at that point, and we were like, "Uh, well, good luck." We didn't quite say it that flippantly, but, really, it was like, we're just figuring this out ourselves, and, but we said, like, "We're happy to walk with you and learn together," and, that really planted a seed in us. Bridge of Hope, co-founder Sandy Lewis said from the very beginning, "Someday, Bridge of Hope should be everywhere." Um, but, it's one of those just ideas. Um, but after a decade of implementing the program and continuing to get some of these calls saying, "Hey, we hear you're engaging the church as part of the solution for homelessness. What does that look like?" Um, we started to say, God has something here, and it's bigger than how we're thinking right now. How can we start thinking bigger? So that was really the impetus for it.
So dig us deeper into what Bridge of Hope does and the kind of services you provide.
Yeah, yeah. So we were really founded with the idea that as so it was in the mid 1980s, and we were starting to see women and children on the streets, which really was a new image of homelessness. And women's shelters were just starting up. And so um, Sandy Lewis and Linda Whitmer are our two co-founders, and One is a public health nurse and one was a shelter director. And they met up at church and just said, how can we engage churches? We're exhausted as social service providers, but how might the church be able to walk with some of these families that we're seeing come in the shelter after 30 days? Uh, we need to turn over their bed to a new family. They're walking out the door into the same situation they came to us from. How do we impact lives for the long haul? So they thought what they were going to do was raise money to build a transitional shelter. Um, and instead, they heard of this idea of providing rental assistance, helping find an apartment, providing rental assistance, and moving families right back into housing as quickly as possible. Today, that's called a housing first philosophy. But, 40 years ago, that wasn't language. And it was just like an idea. We didn't have to invest in a property, but we could provide rental assistance. And it's been a model that has worked. So we provide rental assistance. We also train the neighboring group. We ask for a neighboring group of 6 to 10 people from a local church, and we introduce them to the family who's facing homelessness. And our case manager then walks with the family, but also trains and equips the neighboring volunteers to know how to be the hands and feet of Jesus with the family that they are walking with. We're working with Christian faith traditions across the spectrum of churches, and it is beautiful to see that together as a church, we as churches, we want to be part of a solution here. And so that's our model. It's this three-way partnership. Bridge of Hope providing the case management, a family bringing their strengths, and the neighboring volunteers from a church bringing their strength. And together, we're going to end homelessness for each family.
I love that partnership. Tell us more about the neighboring part of that, because I'm curious if you're a church and going, hey, that sounds really great. We've been wanting to do something in our community. What does that look like for us to get involved and to be a neighboring partner?
Yeah. So we really say it's 6 to 10 people, men and women, younger, older, kind of almost like an extended family, just a group of people. But we are providing 5 hours of training before the neighboring volunteers meet the family they're going to neighbor. And then we provide ongoing training over the course of typically 1 to 2 years is the length of commitment that we ask of neighboring volunteers. And that training is really, we talk about opening our eyes. So it opens our eyes to issues of homelessness and poverty. We talk about cultural humility as part of our training. We talk about opening our hands. How do we learn how to provide tangible, the family needs a meal tonight, or it's 11 o'clock and her car broke down along the side of the road and she needs a ride. Um, so really trying to do a training that is about relationships, but also how do we understand the trauma that a family has experienced in coming to this point, and how do we not contribute to the trauma that they have experienced?
We got a chance as a church to adopt a Somali family and kind of do that as they were migrating over to the States for the first time. And it was neat because we took the whole church approach of, we're here to be there for you, take your shopping, get you your shots, help you get your child in school. And it really transformed for us as a congregation how we think about people outside of our little group ourselves, and really became a real missional push for us in the community. It opened the door for us to be really active in our community, which was nice because we were kind of a church that was pretty much, let's take care of ourselves. I'm curious, when you see churches who work with you, do you see that same shift to having a more outreach-minded approach to just the community and the neighborhood in general when they work with you on this?
Yeah, I would say it is both. So, um, I was just talking to one of our staff who does a lot of church engagement work, and he was saying some churches, they are actively doing outreach and they see Bridge of Hope as just another way to engage their congregation. Other churches need a reminder that part of our mission of Christ is to love our neighbors. And so with those churches, we have to build up and remind them why this is part of the good news that God has called us to. So it's both and.
Yeah, I figured it was.
Yeah, yeah. And I love just that your church was involved with the Somali family. Like the founding of Bridge of Hope was really because the founding church of Bridge of Hope had been working with the Laotian family. This was back in the 80s. And they said, okay, now we've worked with several Laotian families. Could we also be helping some of our families here in our own community that are homeless? And so the model of Bridge of Hope was really modeled on that idea of church world service using um, connecting congregations with immigrant families. And so kind of the Bridge of Hope model was born out of that.
I love it. I want to talk about something else that I really loved about your program, and it's the idea of you emphasize that families need more than just housing, they need a community. And I love that idea of community because to me, community is so important. Tell us about how social capital plays a role in helping these families gain stability.
Oh, oh, yes. Oh, my word. I feel like, neighboring is really this piece that is the Bridge of Hope distinctive, and I feel like it's one of those pieces that you talk about, like, what don't we see about family homelessness? And it's this disruption in relationships that has occurred for families, and often it's relationships that they had to leave. So if 90% of families are coming out of a domestic violence situation or have violence in their family history, sometimes its relationships had to be severed. Um, I think of one story that I just heard recently. Stephanie, a mom in Bridge of Hope, shared her story, which was around domestic violence. And when she was in a domestic violence shelter, heard about Bridge of Hope, and came, we were able to get her into our program, and the way those connections helped her, one way was finding housing. So like that was a she knew somebody who the neighboring volunteers knew. And like, you know how those sometimes in small cities or small towns, those connections really matter. Um, that is social capital. She said the story that she told that just lives with me so much is that she said before coming to Bridge of Hope, on her son's emergency form at his elementary school, she never had anybody's name to write there. And she said after she was in Bridge of Hope, she would write her neighboring volunteers' names and phone numbers there for her emergency contact for her son. And just the fact that to think that she had no one to write down as her emergency contact for her son, who was the most important person in her life. But she felt so alone that she didn't have, um, I get all emotional just talking about it, but that was such a beautiful story and a profound, way that neighboring volunteers, by simply being present, can make such an impact just, um, for families. So social connections, help us fill out forms, um, finding housing, um, things like this sounds amazing, but, transportation, once you have housing, then you have to figure out, "Okay, how do I get to my job and the childcare?" And, sometimes it's going to mean, "Oh, a car because my job is not in an area, or the childcare is not in an area I can even get to with public transportation. And so we just had a situation where a neighboring volunteer was like, I have a second car in my driveway that I never drive, and I will donate it. Um, so that's kind of the abnormal. That was a true God moment. We don't often have like car donations come out of that, but that was just a beautiful way that they felt led to have a connection. Sometimes it's to a mechanic. Hey, would you change oil? She has not had an oil change. She's been living in her car, has not had an oil change for 8,000 miles. Would you do an oil change for her? We have connections that we don't even always think about. One church said, um, go through our attic. We have some things up in our attic that you could just have. And the mom was like, the things in their attic are the things I love most about my house now. So, you just never know.
No, that's powerful. I love that story. Um, One other core value that your organization has, and I love this, and I want you to kind of explain it to us, is cultural humility. When I think about when you're dealing with people who are in dire needs or maybe in a tough place in their life, I think it's really important that you come at it from not I'm going to be your hero, but I can learn from you as much as you can learn from me. So tell us a little bit about what cultural humility means in your organization, how it plays out in Bridge of Hope.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love what you just said. Really, it's about this this concept of cultural humility starts with what for us is also a core value of mutuality and dignity. Um, there, cultural humility is not unique to Bridge of Hope. It's a growing piece in the homeless service world. Really grew out of the medical field, but there's really three tenets of cultural humility, and we work hard at all three of them. The first one is um, critical self reflection and lifelong learning. So, how do we continue to be a learner, be curious, put ourselves in a posture of openness to others around us? The second one is recognizing and challenging power imbalances. So, recognizing that a neighboring volunteer could have a power difference from a neighboring family. So, how do we be attentive to saying, we want to hear your voice? We don't want to just say, oh, here's all this donated furniture we got, and now we're going to move it into your house. Um, do you want this furniture? What of this furniture that we found would you want to have in your house? Just providing um, a sense of going back to what my grandmother says, kind and fair. That recognizing that if we're in a position that could carry power, that we are always inviting the other person's voice intentionally into this relationship. And then the third tenet of cultural humility is around creating institutional accountability. And so for us as an organization, it's looking at our organization, how we do our neighboring training, what we talk about in our neighboring training. For us, brings this layer of cultural humility. And it is important as we think about neighboring. Our neighbors are not all like us. So uh, typically in a neighboring relationship, the neighboring volunteers are housed. The neighboring family is not. Right there, that is a power imbalance. Um, there is likely socioeconomic differences between the families. There are sometimes racial, ethnic differences between the families and neighboring volunteers, and even in the neighboring volunteer group themselves. So one of the things we love is when churches come back to us and say, um, "We love your training. You equip the group for neighboring. and you've equipped them for other ministry in our church as well. And cultural humility is really one of those postures that we have often heard from pastors saying we feel like that training just brings a richness back to our church beyond just this neighboring experience.
Well, you've segued so nicely into my next question. One of the things I love most is leadership. So I'm curious,
Mm.
you've led nonprofits, volunteers, affiliates, national partners. What leadership lessons have shaped you the most in this journey?
Hmm. Well, I can always talk about my favorite leadership authors.
Okay.
That's an easy piece because I think of, like, for me, it's Brene Brown, Patrick Lencioni. They are, like, two of my favorite. Um, but I think it's our own failures that we learn from the most, right? Well, maybe not for you, but for me. Um, like, I feel like, um yeah, I will just share a couple years ago, we were forming a leadership team and for Bridge of Hope National, and we were growing, and so forming a leadership team, I we had great people on the team, but I knew like we were kind of stuck, and I was like, "What? How are we stuck? Why are we not moving forward?" And a dear leader on our leadership team finally said to me, "You need to be more vulnerable for us to move forward and be vulnerable as a group." And it was a lesson in leadership I will never forget. She was being so brave in that moment to name what she needed, and the team was able to echo it, and I was able to lean into areas of vulnerability. And out of that, we created what we call RISK, and it's an acronym RISK that is really our standard for how we want to serve and lead together. And so it's yeah, I feel like if I can learn from my mistakes and do better, that's what I want to do as a leader.
No, I love that. I've learned from my mistakes. One of my favorite authors is John Maxwell, and one of his
Oh,
books was Failing Forward. So the other two
yes.
you named two
Yes.
are also ones I love. So you
Yes.
named three of my favorite leadership authors.
That's great. That's great. Uh,
Is there a story of a family that you walked alongside that continues to inspire you?
mm, okay. So, Michelle is somebody that yeah, that I've walked with her, um, for she was in our program a number of years ago, so I've got to see changes over the years with her, but there's so much about her story that I love. One is that it was right over Christmas. She was in a transitional housing program. She needed to be out by January 1, and we got a call from her, and I was like, "Oh my word, it is right before Christmas." Like, churches are deep into Advent planning, and, like, how am I gonna get a church to say yes right now? Like, that was really what I was thinking. So I called a group, a church, and they were like, "We're gonna make this happen. Absolutely. And yet we can't there's no way we can pull this group together before Christmas." So as we started talking, I said, "Okay, how about is there anybody that could just have lunch with her before Christmas so that she at least feels like she's getting to know people and she knows we're going to help make this happen." Um, so there was three neighboring volunteers. It was a couple and another woman and myself, Michelle and her son. We met at a restaurant. It was a Friendly's restaurant. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but I remember this so much. We sat down. We started having our meal together, And one of the neighboring volunteers just said, "Honey, do you have a place to go on Christmas Day?" And she just burst into tears. And she said, "Not really." And they said, "Please come to our house. We would love to have you." She was so unsure. She looked at me, she was kind of like, and I couldn't tell, did she want to or did she want me to say no? Like I could not read her mind. And finally she said to them, "If you are telling me that I am welcome in your home when I am not welcome in my own mother's home, I will be there." And it was so that she developed really profound relationships with her neighboring volunteers. They picked her son up when she had to work late at night. They took her son over the years to soccer games, and her son today is in his mid-20s, is married. They have a 2-year-old child. And her son today says he has no memory of them being homeless. I love the fact that we can wipe for children that young, we can wipe that memory of even being homeless away for children. That the experience he had of being surrounded by people who loved him and were just present with him and his mom changed his life so much.
I love that story. That's so touching. As you look forward, where do you see Bridge of Hope for the next 5 to 10 years?
Mm. I would hope that in 10 years there are 30 Bridge of Hopes, maybe more. We really want to see new communities that have a desire to have churches engaged in ending homelessness, who have the need, who have a issue around family homelessness, and who have resources to help address the need. We want to see them empowered to launch Bridge of Hope locations. So I'd love to see um, more Bridge of Hope locations in more than 12 states. That's where we are now. Um, and I'd love to see churches saying, how can we make a difference for our neighbors who are facing homelessness?
That's great. So, for people listening at home and thinking, I want to be part of this, what can individuals, churches, or communities do to get involved with Bridge of Hope?
Yeah. Well, I would say neighbor, pray, give, launch a Bridge of Hope. Like those are the kind of our 4 ways. Um, Neighboring, really, I just had one of our neighboring volunteers say, "We have been giving financially to Bridge of Hope for 30 years, but this is the first time we have neighbored. And our lives are changed because of this experience." So they knew the impact of Bridge of Hope, but when they were really engaged in a relationship with a mom and her children, it felt transformational for them personally. So that's the invitation. Can we engage with those who are different than us, who might feel in some ways distant from our own circles that we walk in? Um, there is a joy in neighboring.
Wow, that's
So
great.
all
I
of
love it.
those.
So, I love to ask my guest this other question. What do you want your legacy to be?
It's such a hard question. No wonder you like to ask it. um, I would say I w- I don't know. Maybe this doesn't count as a legacy, but what I would want people to remember and know is that when we are facing dark and hard times, turn to other people. I I want my children and my grandchildren, I want people around me to know community and building relationships with each other is what sustains us when things are hard. So often, and I know this from my own life too, when things are hard, we isolate And I want to say, don't turn to others. That is the beautiful thing in the world, is when we can turn to each other and rely on each other.
Oh, that's beautiful. So in season 6, we have something new, and that's a surprise question. Pick a number between 1 and 10 for your surprise question.
Oh my word. Okay. Seven's my favorite number. I guess I'll go with 7.
All right. So the question is, what book belongs on everybody's shelf?
Oh. Oh, you're gonna ask me about books. I read 100 books a year. No, probably not that many. Oh my word, and I'm gonna draw a blank. What book belongs? It has to be a category. Um, okay. I just have to pick a book, right?
Right.
Because there are just a million books, but I'm going to say for 2025, the like when I look back last year, the book that had the most impact on me was uh, Nomadland, about kind of the RV community and traveling, um, and not quite homeless, but um, finding community in that unhoused group of people. Oh, but now that I say that, I think of another book. Oh, I'm so sorry, but I have to just say there's a new book coming out, um, called Hope for the Mission by Kevin Nye, and it is about homelessness and a faithful church solution. So I also think Bridge of Hope is talked about in that book, and so I've been talking about that book a lot. So anyway, now I'll give you 2.
Oh, that's good. 2 for the price of 1. I like that.
There you go.
So, Edith, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about Bridge of Hope? And where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah. Our website is bridgeofhopeinc.org. And we are on all the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So invite you to connect with us.
Well, Judith, thank you for your passion and your leadership, for decades of work creating communities where families can thrive. Your commitment to ending family homelessness is inspiring. For our listeners, if Edith's story moved you today, take a moment to visit Bridge of Hope. Explore how you can volunteer, support a family, help build bridges of hope to your community. Every person can make a difference, and together we can ensure no family faces homelessness alone. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a review. It helps others find conversations like this one. This Becoming Bridge Builders is until next time, keep building bridges and keep building hope. Thank you so much, Edith.
You bet.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to Noah Bot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin. Thanks again and tune in next time.